you can and you're running with kings. But how far could you go if you run with the wind? And the chances you take are what give you wings, and you can fly.
Good afternoon. Welcome to Consider Civility. I am Lew Bayer, CEO of Civility Experts and proud member of the Civility Center board. And I'm here today with Kent Roberts, co-founder of the Civility Center. And if you've been following along our Civility in the Community series on YouTube, this Consider Civility channel, I would hope, and if not, please consider visiting Amazon to buy or download an Kindle copy of Kent Roberts' 2 books, Community Weaving and Bring a Dish to Pass. You'll find the books are chock full of really important aspects of civility philosophy, some tools, some case studies, some great strategies for starting a civility initiative in your community. And in case you don't stay to the end, which I hope you do, you can reach out to Kent by way of contacting events@civilityexperts.com, and we can organize a call or email with him if you're interested. So today we are going to talk about some content that I'm particularly fond of from the Bring a Dish to Pass book. So Kent, can we look a little bit more closely at the principles of engagement for civility in the community? I believe there are 6 of them. And if we have a little bit of time today, if you're able to give us a little bit of explanation on each and tell us why it's important. Thank you, Kent.
Well, thank you, Lou. First of all, why engage? Why are we engaging people? And I think we need to always ask that why question first. If we're serious about engaging people, these are the principles of engagement. Some people want to point to things, say, we're engaging people, but yet they're really not that worried about or trying to really engage with people. So if they are, then these are these 6 points that I think are important. And the first one is view everybody in positive terms. And when we think about that, I just want everyone to understand that people can smell out how you view them. It's not hard for people to have immediate feedback on whether or not people view them as less than, equal to, or however. So why would we not want to treat everybody in positive terms? Because, you know, if we want them to be productive, inclusive members of our society or community or whatever, we know that we must, the positivity, the power of positive is so important. And you know, with each one of these points, Lou, if you want to ask another clarifying point, don't be afraid to jump in so we can take each one and make sure that we really dig into it and we get the answer so people understand what it is we're saying. But it's important to stay in the positive. When we get into the negative, people posture or people draw lines and revert back to a posture that is trying to defend instead of trying to be open and trying to look at all the possibilities that exist. And we can only do that through the positive. There are reasons why we may want to get into negative terms from time to time in problem solving. But when we are really trying to engage people and to explore and discover, we must view each other in positive terms. The second one has to do with common language. And I don't mean English or French or Spanish or anything. I'm talking about how we communicate with one another determines the quality of and the civility of the conversation. people don't even understand as a teacher uh, in talking to parents or even talking to my students. I, I sometimes wasn't even aware of the educational ease that I was using that was getting in the way of the message that I was trying to deliver. Uh, it's important that we try to develop these common languages and understand one another. Um, I think that that the more cross training that we do and the more interaction we have, we can break down some of these things, because whether you're in the medical field, they have their own terminology that they use, and they kind of expect everyone to understand that. Same way in law. Um, I, I just mentioned education. There's just and business speak. Often they use language that they understand, but once again, it divides people and it shuts people down, because whether they feel less than or whether they feel that they're not intelligent enough to understand and stay with the conversation. So if you want to engage someone, use language that uh, is inclusive and does not divide. Um, One of the things that we did with the Bring a Dish and community weaving was we really tried to write it at an 8th or 9th grade reading level. And there are so many books and so many things out there, magazine articles and so on, concerning community building or whatever we're trying to do, sometimes even civility. And we're using language that sometimes is beyond just the common layperson. So we want to use common language, and so that we understand, and checking in every now and then and saying, do you understand what we mean by this? Or what do you know? And having people clarify constantly, I don't understand that term. So making sure that we do that. Another principle of engagement um, is building strong relationships of trust. And sometimes uh, you cannot engage people. I use this scale constantly in some of our other work that we've talked about. On a scale to 1 to 10, if the level of trust is on a scale of 1 to 10, a 1, well, the, that number is in direct correlation to the ability of the work that you can actually do together and engage somebody at. If you are at very low levels of trust, then that's the only thing that you can actually engage with. You can't try to talk about complex issues if you're talking, if your trust level is very, very low. So if you have a level of 1 or 2, then you only can work with low hanging fruit and things that are right there in front of you. But you must start somewhere, and you must build that trust and build it up to a 3, 4, 5, and hopefully within your community of folks, you can create high levels of trust, so then you can really have discussions and engage people at a higher level in problem solving at a scale of 7, 8, 9, 10. So I think that's really important. Um, and in the middle of all of this, and whether this is first or last or whatever, is we must constantly be reminded that we share humanity. The shared humanity is something that always must be just kind of the underpinning. We all love our children. We all care for our children, and we all care about, hopefully, uh, other things that we share as far as family and just dignity and respect and treating each other in a way that you would like to be treated. But that shared humanity that goes across the board, sometimes in today's world, where we're constantly trying to divide, maybe on race or ethnicity or economics, uh, in some way, we forget our shared humanity, that we all care. And when we lose that, understanding of our shared humanity, we can start talking about some things that are not very nice and will get in the way of any kind of building. This next one of principles of engagement is, value the process as well as the results. Now, I want to use this as an example here, because I think this is extremely important for those of you that are really trying to work and engage people and work within your organization or your community or even your family. It is not unusual. You have process people and you have results people. Now think about this for a second. Within your business or within your community, you've got people who they don't want to sit around and talk about process. They want to get things done. And they are really results oriented, and they don't care about process. They just want a way in which they can make or do or get accomplished whatever the task that they see before them. On the other hand, you've got people who are wired completely different, who say, how can we perform the task until we understand the process? And right now, with COVID being as strong as it is, we're having problems within community. A lot of people are process oriented. We're talking about getting people to wear masks and distance and washing our hands and all this other kind of stuff. And other people are saying, hey, let's get the vaccine inside people. Let's don't worry, just go ahead and just accomplish this. And so you run into that friction between process and product, folks. And I want people to understand that's normal. That is okay. And you've got to value the process people and you've got to value the results people. They're both needed to make your effort get better and have better results. So as we talk about how we do things and what we do, understand there's some people really want to focus on the what, and some people want to focus on the how. And it is not an either or, it's a both. And we must value those people. And we, sometimes we have to separate them and let the process people do their process, and let the results, when the people, the action people who want the action, we've got to then be able to provide some action. You can't stay in process all the time, but at the same time, you can't be working all the time without process. Hopefully that makes sense. And the last principle of engagement I want to, that we have used in community building and so on, and bringing your dish to pass, and that is to value both people from within the community, as well as value people who have learned and look outside the community, who have tried to solve problems like this within their community. It's not an either or, but you've got to value both the value of the people within the community and also the experts and the other information that we can gather from outside. So, nothing is completely new under the sun. You may be unique in certain ways, but there are others who have attempted to do things. Try to find out, but don't always believe that always the answer lies with the expert who's 50 miles away. Or at the same time, think that all the answers just are right here within our community. I would say that the resources and a lot of that stuff lies within, but you can move the whole process faster if you also accept the idea of having folks from getting as much information as you can or use it an outside resource. So if you're serious about engaging people, keeping them engaged, and moving this process along and the betterment of your society or your organization, these principles of engagement can go a long, long way.
Excellent. Okay, so I do have a few questions. Thank you. I'm looking forward to reading that section of the book again, but just a couple of things here. So at the very beginning, Kent, you mentioned that a key question is, why are we engaging? And I would be very interested to know what's the right answer to that question.
I think the answer is better. I really do. People are trying to make their community better. They're trying to make themselves better. They're trying to improve their business. They, you know, we can learn so much from each other. And I as a teacher, for example, I learned far more from my students than they ever learned from me.
Mm,
And not being open to engage with my students so that I could learn from them would have robbed me all those treasures that I hold dear in my heart and made me into the person I am today. So we we've got to engage folks to learn and to get better through learning. I mean, I don't know how else we learn for a change than to engage. I think
mhm.
engagement is I feel sorry for people who think they have all the answers and stay within themselves. And the other thing is, even if you do have all the answers, what good does that do the community or the organization? Unless that those answers and that discovery of those answers can be spread throughout your organization or throughout your community. How do we learn? And I really do believe that whether it was Socrates or Aristotle sitting around and doing asking the questions and learning from one another and putting things out there is a way in which we can just fruitfully make things better.
Excellent. And I agree with that. And I think one of the key things that we often come back to this, and we spoke about it in one of our other sessions, but this idea of, defining the terms. And so just by nature of the word, the concept of engaging, when we work with corporate training and civility, not unlike community civility, we're always trying to make leadership understand that if you say you're measuring engagement, you're measuring the extent to which the employees, or in this case, the members of the community, willingly engage. I mean, you can't make people do something. You can't make them believe it's important. They have to come to that decision by themselves, and they choose to engage. And so I really like that that seems to be embedded both in the positive terms, but also in having a clear answer to that question, why are we engaging? And then, a little bit further in, you said something about, a lot of good stuff, but something about this common language. And so I do recognize how critical that is, but I'm wondering if you can provide a couple ways, how do we do that? Like, how do you teach people to use a common language and develop it? Do you put it in a communication code, rules of engage? Like, how do you get to the point where there's a common language?
Well, I think first of all, you've got to make it uh, okay at any time to stop and say, what does that term mean? Or another thing that happens is acronyms, and just kind of, you can have fun with it, because I'll say we can't use acronyms, and then I'll be doing some community work with a group of people, and before I even know what I'm doing, I'm using an acronym, and they call me on it, and that's good. The idea that we must have clarifying when we hear a term, we've got to say that right up front, that it is okay at any time when a term is used that you don't understand. You're not the only one in the room that doesn't understand that term. So ask for clarification on terms, and get that built in to the work and to the conversation, to the engagement. Make sure that that happens. I don't think you need a glossary, because then you become so tied into the glossary that becomes your product, and you can get lost in that. But at the same time, you need to try to make sure that people are understanding and that it's okay to ask questions. And hopefully that'll. I had something else there, but it slipped my mind. But if you, I think that gives you the idea of how you can create a common language. The other thing that I would say is this: the more you train together, and the more you engage together, the blending of that language happens. Just happens, especially if people ask clarifying questions right up front.
Excellent. Yes, thank you. That helps me a great deal. And then something else that kind of popped in my head when you're talking about this idea of shared humanity, which I think is really deficit in our kind of collective conversation these days. You know, we kind of talk about how important peace is, but we focus on the process, which is interesting because you spoke about process versus results too. But related to the shared humanity, the in my world, we try to get people to understand that civility is about valuing people, and if you truly respect people, you value them equally. Can you help us understand a little bit more about this idea of shared humanity? Like, is that respect in a nutshell, or how would you describe that to people?
Well, I'm going to use this example. Let's say that I think we could probably agree that we all care about our children. I don't think that's a given. But if we care about our children, our own children that live in our house, in our community, if we truly, truly love them and care for them, we have to care for all children of the community, because the minute our children go outside our house and go into the community with other children, if we don't value and we don't understand that they share the same space, they share the same time period, and also many of the same activities and schools and churches and other different community activities. So how can we care for one child if we don't care for all children? And so if we care about families and we care about the culture in which a family lives, if a family feels less than or wants and is doing behaviors that will not only harm them but possibly harm the neighborhood or the community, we're at danger here. So we must understand we share this planet. We share this community. We share these streets. We share the schools and the churches and the other community places and the playgrounds and everything that our recreational trails and so on. And if they're all safe, it's not safe just for our children. It's safe for all children. So when we expand that and when we think about that, if it's not right for mine, then it's not right for yours. If it's not right for yours, it's not right for mine. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely. It sure does. And then my last question here relates a little bit to the looking within and outside the community for guidance. And you articulated fairly well about how a lot of the expertise we need is in the community. But when or did it happen in your experience that sometimes the problems and issues are so far advanced or so sort of incorporated or embedded in the community that in fact the people are the problem? And how do you navigate that when you want to be reasonable and bring everyone to the table? I've been in situations, workplace communities, or other communities where the people who are the most involved and the most vocal and sometimes the biggest funders, or people who seem to have the most to contribute, are actually part of the problem. How do you navigate that?
Well, I think that sometimes we need. I'll use a couple of examples. Obviously, there's things we can read and learn from wonderful materials that are out there and case studies of what's been done. But another thing is the importance of neutral facilitation. Um, and I, this might be a little complex for someone to understand. Maybe it'll be simple and it'll make complete sense to folks. But when you have a neutral facilitation who doesn't have a dog in the hunt, and it allows people to again keep a level playing field, and it doesn't seem to shift where the money is weighted more, or in some cases where I've been to a community, well, you really can't make a decision around here unless you have a road named for you, or a building, community buildings that have your name on them, that type of thing. But when you have a neutral facilitation, uh, I think that's very helpful. Um, I just had a brain slippage myself here, that a point that I was uh, trying to make. Um, it as we discover these things together, I think it becomes really important to understand and get to, and this is the point that's complex, the moral imperative of why we're doing the work. If people don't understand that, some people say, well, we're doing this and this is just kind of nice stuff and nice exercise to do. No, once again, it is hard-nosed business. This is the right thing to do, and it's the smart thing to do. It's not only something that, again, is warm and fuzzy, but there is a moral imperative to the work that we're trying to do. And when we can get to that moral imperative, and when we understand that, we can put aside a lot. We can let a lot of things go because we truly understand the importance and why we're doing the work. And people will get there, Lou. You've got to give them enough space, and you've got to keep asking the right questions, and people will discover and finally come out and just say it. If we don't do this work, we're toast, to some other words that would come close to that. But they'll say that this stuff has got to be done if we want our community to survive or thrive. And, some people just want to exist. But I don't know. I think people, if they don't do things properly, I think that some communities just thrive. Why? Well, because they do a lot of things that you and I are talking about, Lou.
That's right. So my hope is that in part by sharing some of this experience and these aspects of education about civility in the community, that we can help individuals support their communities and get them to thrive. So thank you, listeners, for joining in, and please stay tuned. We have some other great interviews coming in this Consider Civility in the Community segment. Thank you.
Reason why each of us comes to this earth, and your actions will always speak louder than words, and you'll never know what you're capable of until you try.